Hi, David Moore, Equity Advantage, Robert Smith, Peregrine Private Capital, and if you've watched all segments so far, you know I started off feeling sort of depressed this morning, and I don't know why, but suddenly talking about things like the doom loop, I'm for some reason laughing and smiling. But anyway, so we want to talk a little bit more about that, Bob. So that's a term that's sort of an interesting term for people to contemplate. But you have some more comments you'd like to make regarding that topic?
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate a bit on that. What we could call the urban doom loop in terms of office properties has in large part been catalyzed by the digital age in terms of people not having to be necessarily in a specific place to do work. I mean, we're in the process of redefining how work's done, and a lot of those things that were heretofore considered inconvenient with regard to work, living close to an employer, commuting, all of those things, may not be as necessary in the future as we thought they were in the past. And that's in large part a product of the digital age. And so I think we can enlarge upon that or elaborate on it and talk about the theme of what we call property obsolescence, in that in the digital age, not all property types are created equally. And so the market isn't going to treat them ultimately equally from a valuation standpoint, or they're very unlikely to. So there are property types clearly that are commercial property types that are becoming obsolete because of the digital economy. The most conspicuous we have been talking about clearly is office, but long running and parallel to that has been retail. Even prior to COVID-19, the pandemic, and attendant economic shutdowns, we had too much retail bricks and mortar property for the digital age. That was all there was to it. And all the pandemic did was take about a decade worth of movement from bricks and mortar retail to e-tail and accelerate it down into about 18 months. And so going forward, that property type may also be increasingly obsolescent or obsolete as more and more business migrates to the internet. My wife is constantly complaining about the fact that she can't go in and try anything on and has to buy it remotely on the internet. And I tell her, well, that's because the manufacturers, the marketers aren't marketing to people our age. They're marketing to the next generation and the generation behind that, which is totally comfortable and actually in many respects, most respects, I think prefers buying things remotely because they don't particularly like interacting with other people. And so when in 1031 exchange or simply selling a property and buying another property, I think it's very important for retail investors, because the institutional guys already get this. By way of example, I can't remember the specific name of the portfolio, but a very large institutional owner of property, the component represented by office in the last 10 years has gone from something like 40% down to 4%. So the institutional players get property obsolescence and have been moving away from those property types they deem obsolete for quite some time. I don't think retail investors get it. And so when considering property replacement, you need to think long and hard about those property types that are going to be relevant, not just now, but in the future. And office and much of office and retail may not be part of that.
Yeah, the office thing it's interesting. I mean, we still maintain our offices, and I like it. I just like the energy of the office, especially with my sales marketing team. The ability to sit there and talk, but a lot of the meetings we've got are via Zoom, and a lot of the presentations we do are online instead of in person. I mean, I miss the energy of being in front of a room of people, but the reality is that a lot of people, to your point, don't necessarily want to do that. If you look at the retail world, you look at malls, and I mean, a lot of the indoor malls are having problems. A lot of the big outdoor malls, they're really changing it to an experience situation where you've got lots of other things. You got the restaurants there, you got movie theaters there, you've got places for the kids to play and whatever else might be going on. And you can look at example after example of that retail world and the malls doing that to get people into those spaces. But no, I mean, it's just one of those things where, I mean, years ago, this is probably 25 years ago, when we actually were putting our first websites together, and URLs. It was no big deal in those days to pick a URL, and I mean, we took 1031exchange.com, and that was like, oh, yeah, we like that one. We'll take that. I mean, we probably should have locked up a whole bunch of them. That was a pretty good one to hang on to. But I didn't really think about it from that context at that point. But one of the guys putting this stuff together for us on his website, it was, your address where you're located. And the comment was something along the lines of, whether we're across the street, across the world, it really doesn't matter in the digital age. And that's, I mean, if you look at our businesses and what we do, the percentage of business done regionally versus outside, great majority of our business is not here regional. So it doesn't really matter where somebody is today. It's what they can do for you, right. And it's definitely made a difference. And I guess the one thing I would point out, and if you've watched our not seminars, but seminars and our blogs that we're doing right now, you've heard me say it before. You're in a situation where if we look at just Section 121, the universal exclusion for a home sale, that 250 or 500 really doesn't do much for people. I mean, it's sort of interesting because we're moving my 91-year-old mom out of her house into a senior living place, and if you look at her little 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, it's worth more than any house she's ever owned in her entire life. It's crazy what things have done. But if you look at somebody's home and you look at those exclusions and you start looking at people living at home, what are you selling? People don't really think about what they're selling in that situation. You got a home office, you've treated it as a home office for more than 3 out of the last 5 years. You sell that home, you've got a 1031 component of that home sale as well as Section 121, which is another opportunity to go out and buy stuff from Mr. Smith. But anyway, once again, we're going to sign off. We'll be right back in a minute. Don't go away. David Moore, Equity Advantage. Robert Smith, Peregrine Private Capital. Thank you.